Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This is episode number 115, and it is Friday, so we're a day early, but they won't know that when it's uploaded, I suppose.
Well, they will now.
Yeah. We decided to not download, but record a day early. And truthfully, I can't even remember why. It was something on your end. You said that scheduling wise, it would work out better if we did it a day early. So here we are.
Yeah, it's the 1 week a month or 1 week a quarter that my wife has to work all weekend. So in order for me to be able to train tomorrow, it would either be record tomorrow or train tomorrow. So we compromised and recorded today and trained tomorrow earlier. So,
yeah, it's easy to reschedule not really reschedule. Well, I guess reschedule, but schedule the podcast around because it's only a singular day versus training, which is multiple times a week.
Right.
So lo and behold, here we are, day early, not quite the weekend, but in essence, for most people, it's like Friday night really starts the weekend. And I kind of take on that mentality myself as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So got a training session planned for super early tomorrow morning, which, I shouldn't really say super early. It's 4:30, which, to be honest, is early for most people, but that's our regular start time anyway, 4:30, 4:45. So
yeah,
nothing out of the ordinary there.
It almost feels like I almost feel bad sometimes when people are talking about they got up early today or this, that, the other thing. And they say they got up early and it's like 7:00,
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel bad for I always say, oh, that's cool. I had my workout in and first meal in and, had half my morning done by then. But it's not even early to us anymore. Like, I guess super early for us would be like 2.
Yeah.
2:30, which is not out of the question for certain circumstances, I guess. But
I think it's important to note, though, and we've done this before, but just to kind of clarify for people that those days that we get up early, it's never optimal for us in terms of sleep because you never can get optimal. You're always striving for what's optimal or what's best. Like it's kind of like perfection or the perfect physique. You never really achieve it, but our sleep is pretty well regulated as well, where we go to bed significantly earlier than most people. So the fact that we get up earlier doesn't mean that we stay up to the same time and just compromise sleep by getting up earlier. We go to bed earlier than most people too, to account for those hours of sleep that we would normally be missing most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, there's extenuating circumstances where we don't get enough sleep, and I'm sure that I speak for the masses when I say that. But for us specifically, when we get up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or whatever time we're waking up, we always account for it beforehand, obviously, and get to bed early. So
exactly,
I think that's just
as early as we possibly can, anyways.
Yeah, because I think sometimes people will say things to me like, I get this all the time as people say, do you ever sleep? Because they see me at the gym at 3 whatever, 4 whatever, and posting things, and then I'll usually upload something right before I go to bed, whether it's like a training clip of one of my clients or athletes on my story or something, so it looks like I'm posting something very, very early and I'm posting something very, very late, and people fail to recognize or realize that those are both immediately when I wake up and immediately before I go to bed.
Right.
So it looks like I'm doing it perpetually, like 24/7, which obviously isn't the case, but
right.
But it's always nice starting the weekend, especially Saturday, on a super early note, because normally we sleep in a little bit on Saturdays to a degree. Like we'll be at the gym at like 5 or 6. And, we've talked about it all the time that it's just crazy how like a little bit of time can throw you off mentally and make you feel like you're behind.
Yep.
And then the other thing is it's nice because it's amazing how quickly your sleep patterns or your circadian rhythm can get disrupted if you're suddenly out of routine.
I agree. And it's nice, the one thing that I've found is once you get onto a good sleep schedule, and like I reference sleep schedule because you talk about that a lot when you're raising a child. And it's like important to set and establish a good bedtime and a good sleep schedule and habits for babies when they're learning how to be a productive member of society. And I notice that if I get out of my sleep schedule, either I have to get up, or extraordinarily later compared to when I normally wake up. And my whole day is off. It's not off like to the point where it's like unbelievable, but it is
Mhm.
off.
Yeah, for sure. And then like the other thing is that it with in regards to a sleep cycle, it's truly it's unfortunate, but it's kind of like muscle gain where it takes forever, it feels like, to establish some type of mastery of it. Where if you're
Right,
trying to go to bed at a certain time and get up at a certain time, it seems like it takes forever to regulate your body to that set time. And whether it's weeks or months or whatever, depending on the individual and the other circumstances that are kind of present there, but it takes
right,
a while to get it set. And then one day going to bed super late or sleeping in or oversleeping or napping during the day seems to like completely disrupt the entirety of the effort you put in for several weeks prior. So it's like I
right,
tried so hard to focus on this sleep pattern. I finally nailed it down. I had one late night because this came up and now I'm tired again when I wake up.
right. And that actually makes me think about, like, because you know, full transparency here is I'm the guy that's always a few minutes late to the gym
Mhm.
every day, and you can vouch for that. A few minutes meaning usually it's if we start at 4:45, I'm pulling in at 4:48.
Yeah.
So and now that comes full circle. It does take a lot of time to get used to a new schedule, and my body has been perpetually waking up every single day for work for the last 8 years at 4:15. So other than the stint that I was working out at 3 o'clock in the morning so I could go to work, be at work by 5, I've been doing that for almost a decade. So I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that it's taken me some time to get used to waking up at 3:45 so I can be at the gym by 4:45.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about that until you said that it takes so much time to get used to it.
I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but a buddy of mine and myself we were talking one time, and there was a group of us, and I can't remember. So I'd like to give credit to the individual that said this, but I can't remember who it was. Well, a group of my friends and I were talking, and one of our buddies asked us if we could have any superpower, what would it be? And
Huh.
I'm sure I've told this story on air before, but it just kind of like resonates with me all the time because I thought it was such a creative answer. Because generally, you have people say things like invisibility or the ability to fly or like the real cliche superpowers.
Yeah.
And he said that he would have the ability to never need sleep. And you ask him, well, what the heck's that about? And he says, think about how much you could get done in a day's time or a week's time or a month's time if you didn't have to sleep. And you were
Right.
tired and you were just not necessarily insanely energized, but just your normal wake self for forever, essentially. And I thought, man, that's so cool because you could basically double your capacity as far as what you'd be able to accomplish.
Right. You would.
Especially because it's not that you sleep 12 hours, like, well, I don't think most people sleep 12 hours half of the day in the literal sense of splitting it 50-50, but you have to consider that even if you sleep 8 hours or 7 hours, how much of that is bedtime routine or wake up routine that would be eliminated also.
Right. There would be so much time. Wow. There's so much you could get done. I could
Yeah.
talk about the what ifs for hours, actually.
Well, it's kind of like the old saying when people say that there's only 24 hours in a day, but unfortunately there's really not 24 hours because not all of them are usable.
Right. That actually makes me think of one of the fitness gurus that I follow wrote a book called the 25-hour day.
Hmm.
I believe it's called the 25-hour day. And it's by Nick Bare. It's Bare Performance Nutrition. And I briefly read some of the book. I didn't read the whole book. I got sidetracked. But from what I gather is he's talking about the same stuff that we talk about, capitalizing on the morning when normally you would be sleeping, getting all of your like selfish needs done early before you should be awake, and or late at night before while you should be sleeping before you or after you should have went to bed. Either or, capitalize on them hours that you waste in bed. And not to say it's a waste, but capitalize on some of that time to do your selfish things. So like essentially you are getting some additional time in your 24-hour day if you broke it up, 8 hours of sleep, 16 hours awake, you know, you're gonna gain some hours on the back end because you're prioritizing yourself.
One thing that's always fascinated with me, and let's kind of take a moment to digress away from the topic at hand and briefly mention that the theme of this podcast, which we try to make reoccurring and we try to reclarify and reiterate to people on multiple occasions, just so they understand that the purpose of this podcast was always for you and I to network with successful people and talk about success and try to circumnavigate our own successful paths by
Right.
finding commonalities among successful people. So we interview these people, we have several discussions amongst ourselves, and then we also kind of indirectly interview people in our day-to-day lives that are successful, and we try to find what all of them have in common. And one of the fascinating things to me is how there's almost like an engineering process that goes into time management in people's days. It's much like finances. That's like kind of the analogy that I can compare it to, because I think about, okay, I get paid X amount of money for salary. And I did this one time with my kids in class because we were talking about salary, and I'm very transparent and could care less if people know how much money I make for my different professions. So it is what it is, especially with teaching, because I'm a government employee, so you can look it up online how much money I make as a salary as a teacher. So I was
Right.
talking to my kids, and when you tell them I make X amount of thousands of dollars, that's like an exorbitant amount of money for them, and understandably so. And I told them how you still feel like you don't have any money from time to time, because this was before my online training business, and this was before all of my athlete training really, really took off to the degree where it could sustain me financially. So, I mean, I just was fresh out of college and had just started teaching. And I told them, yeah, it's really not that much money. And they're like, well, how is it not that much money? What could you spend it on? So obviously they're fifth graders, so they don't understand the concepts of how expensive life is.
Yeah.
So you go through and it's like, okay, well, if I make $40,000 a year, and that you break that down by month, and well, first of all, before the monthly fees, you take out retirement fees and taxes and what my paycheck actually is every 2 weeks, and then you multiply that by whatever 26 or however many pays that you get throughout the year, and then you go down and itemize every single thing, like all the bills, rent, car payment, all the things that I was paying at the time, cell phone bill, all that stuff. And then you realize that you're not left with like anything. And you're basically pinching pennies towards the end of your pay period until the next payday. And then it's just, people call it, I've heard it used, the term used, exchange day. It's not payday, it's exchange day, because you just exchange your money in as soon as it hits your bank account.
Oh yeah.
So in the point of me, going down that whole spiel is that's how like your time is too. When you think about how much time you have in a day, it's like, okay, 24 hours. Well, you don't really have 24 hours, because you're going to need about 8 hours allocated towards sleep. And even if you're not sleeping the full 8 hours, you're giving some of that time to a routine, either pre or post bed, both generally. And then you think, okay, how much time do I spend cooking my food? How much time do I spend using the bathroom on average per day? How much time do I spend in the shower? How much time do I spend doing this or that? And you go through and you realize that, like, man, I really don't have that many hours of a day to be productive. So I really need to capitalize on them. And then you can get focused on very specific nuance that you would normally ignore, like on phones, how it tells you how much screen time you have dedicated to certain apps. So you could look at Instagram and see how much time you spend scrolling through. And it's pretty alarming for most people. I think that when people do that, that's kind of like an exercise, like a therapeutic exercise where people can kind of have their eyes open and say, oh my goodness, this is necessary for me to self improve, is for me to spend less time aimlessly scrolling on an app.
Right. And I've actually found myself with that. And I use that function on my phone a lot because I want to keep that time down to a bare minimum.
Yeah.
Because it robs you, like social media and technology, as helpful as it can be, it robs you of so much time of your day, of your productive time. It's
Well, and I think that
unbelievable.
with productivity too, it's pretty much like anything. It's like in the gym where I've had this discussion often when it comes to volume, training volume. Like how much work should I do? How many reps, sets, and total load should I have over the course of a week, whether you measure training volume by day or training volume by week? And it's like, well, how do you accrue that volume? Like if you have X amount of working sets of X amount of exercises, if you add an extra 2 sets, is it going to be productive? Or are you just going to be so worn down that you're just kind of doing sets and going through the motions? Are they like intentional sets where you're actually focused and moving weight and contracting and actively getting some type of benefit from it? Or are you just doing 10 sets of 10 when it's really almost impossible to give an effort of a level 10 to 10 sets of 10, you know?
Right.
So, and I think that time management or productivity for that matter falls in the same categories. It's really not about how many hours you have, but how you spend a few hours. Like, because if I know there's no perfect way to definitively quantify what I'm talking about in terms of how productive we're talking, but would you rather spend 5 hours being somewhat productive or 3 hours or 2 hours being unbelievably productive?
That is the question.
And I think that I always lean towards, with anything in life, it seems like I always lean towards quality and not quantity. So,
That's right. And you know, we talk about that a lot with like diet and training splits is sustainability. You
yeah.
know, if you can be sustainable with a good quality with a 30-minute workout versus hit and miss with an hour workout, which is more beneficial in the long run.
Mhm.
Or if I'm just trying to, you know, play off of what you were saying where, 10 sets of 10. If you could do that for 3 days a week, cool. But if you could do 3 sets of 10, 6 days a week, which is going to be more beneficial?
Yeah.
And it's that I think time management, sustainability, managing your sleep, and understanding effort are all like really important. And those are all things that like recently I'm finding myself growing in each department, kind of systematically.
Well, I think that the growth is something that should never stop. And again, it's like we've said before, it seems like, and I think I remember us talking about this very, very recently, that people that are successful tend to be successful in multiple areas. So when you
Right.
said you're growing systemically, it's happening in all other areas just because, like, I think that anytime you're trying to be successful in anything, time management is a transferable quality. Like if you use
Right.
good time management at your job, it's going to transfer over to your family. It's going to transfer over to your recreational life, like spending time at the gym or whatever. I don't think that very few people who have true good time management don't transfer it.
Right.
It's almost like
Exactly.
a
Well,
thing that's just a habit at that point then.
yeah, because if you don't transfer it, do you really have good time management? Because you would account for that in your management of your time. You know, like you wouldn't just manage your time. If you were like really good at time management, you wouldn't only be really good at work. You would it
Absolutely.
would it would it would it would inevitably have to spill over into your life because you would be obsessive about it. And I
Yeah,
think that's like one thing that being obsessive about is not a bad thing
absolutely.
because yeah, everything you do, even if it's your fun time, You know, even if it's like your personal relax time, if you manage your time well, you're going to capitalize on the time that you allocate to having fun or relaxing or spending time with family or whatever it is. You insert, you know, your situation into that.
Well, I think that's a good place to kind of go to a commercial break. And before we do, I want to just kind of give our audience and our listeners a brief idea of where we're heading. You mentioned to me, and I think that this was the perfect timing to do this, that you'd like to kind of revisit New Year's resolutions,
Yes,
because
I
that was
agree.
something that last year you and I thought did a pretty good job with revisiting those very frequently. We did so when they were fresh, January, February. We visited them during the summer. We revisited them back during the fall. So it was something that we were pretty cognizant of when we made them, and continued to be self-aware of those goals and ambitions as we transition through the year. So let's go to a quick commercial break, and we'll talk more about our previously made resolutions when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram, and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we are back from our commercial break. All right. Prior to the break, mentioned that we were going to revisit New Year's resolutions. It is the end of January, and this will actually be our last podcast in the month of January, our last episode. So let's discuss, Justin. Let's just go back and forth one at a time, refresh the listeners, or maybe not refresh, but tell the listeners, those who have not been listening, what our New Year's resolutions were, and kind of give some quantifiable measures of progress, if we're able to at this time, a month in, because the unfortunate reality is some people don't make it even a full month with their goals.
Right. So do you want to go first, or would you like for me to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay.
So I outlined 3 goals. The first, and they were kind of in different aspects of life. My 3 did not have to do with the same thing. I guess I'll appropriately start with the one that's kind of near and dear to the topic at hand, being this podcast, considering we're recording. And we had a goal, and this was, I don't want to say we, because I was the one who came up with it, but it's both of us that are helping to execute this, because I can't do this without your assistance, obviously.
Right.
Was to have at least 10 guests on the show. That was one thing that early on in the show, I feel like we did a very, very good job of getting guests on consistently. And you and I eventually got not good, but it wasn't difficult for us to communicate and have decent amount of dialogue on air consistently. Like, we didn't have to think, because when we first started, we've told everybody how you and I would get notepads out and plan out what we were going to say and all the topics we were discussing. And we would take like a half hour just to get ready for an episode in terms of note taking. Whereas now we have no clue what we're going to talk about. We just hit record and go. So that comfortability kind of came at a price, because what happened was it was so easy for us to just not have guests on that we kind of like slacked and like neglected to do so as frequently as we should have. So we said 10 guests in the course of the year, which would be about a guest a month. Now, I know that obviously there's 12 months, but I just figured that there would be months where there would be some scheduling issues or conflicts with our guests where we wouldn't necessarily possibly be able to get one on. So that said, it is almost the end of January. Again, this is the last episode that we'll record in the month of January, and we already have had 2 guests on.
2 spectacular guests, might I add.
Certainly. We had Dr. Edwin Adams and Dr. Tyler Bordick, both of whom I will consistently continue to link in my story, so you guys can listen to their episodes. I would highly recommend both of them. And that puts, if we've had 2 for the month of January, that puts us on pace for 24. Now, very unrealistic and unlikely that we would reach 24, but again, that wasn't the goal. It was just that we would have at least 10. Currently in discussions with a pretty big guest for our next one. And he and I, and this is the first time that I've really expounded upon much to you, other than who the guest is, but we're going to wait and reveal it once he's officially on. But I've had some back and forth with him via email, and we're working out days and times right now. So he's for sure interested and will be on within the next couple of weeks. And I've also made communications with a few other guests as well, tentatively, not talking about dates, not talking about times, just saying, hey, would you be interested in being on? To which all of the people that I reached out to, it was a yes. So well on our way to accomplishing that goal, but don't want to count our chickens before they hatch. Just need to make sure that we stay diligent and try to get ahead of the game beforehand, which was kind of our goal with the other two guests was, get them in early. And that way, if those extenuating circumstances do happen, we would have the ability to account for them by having these guests on a little bit earlier in the year. So,
right, exactly.
Box
I
one
gotta
is-
say, right, I gotta say, I'm really excited for this next one.
yes, as am I.
It's going to be a good time.
Reasons. So let's go on to yours. Your first goal, or one of the first goals that you had, was.
Yeah. So my first one was I wanted to follow the footsteps of you. So follow the footsteps of success and take your lead. So last year you had a lot of success by setting vague goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of failure by setting extremely focused goals that had very little room for error. So I changed things up this year and I wanted to be very vague with my goals. So with that being said, I'm not going to do the first one because I feel like that one's kind of a cop out to be the first one. I'll talk about it because I have an update for it, but make progress validated by two parties. And I want to use you for the first time because we talk every day and we train together every day, but I wanted to ask you because this is how I plan to do it. So ask you what you think. How do you think my progress has been since New Year's to now? Raw, without any hesitation. The floor is yours.
So I think that there's multiple avenues that you would need to look at when you talk about progress. I know that yours was physical progress.
Yes, I meant to say that.
So before I get there, though, I would say mental progress has been good because consistency is good.
Yep.
Your enthusiasm and mentality towards the goal of physical progress has been good because realistically, the physical progress is not going to come unless the mental state is accounted for first. And you're in a good mental place. So therefore, I think that the physical progress will follow. And we have tangible evidence of that. So strength is going up from where you were, which is a quantifiable data point. It's something that we can actually analyze and measure and track. And likewise with your body weight. So your body weight is down. And
yes,
we've compared some pictures over the past 2 weeks and have seen some small incremental changes. And we have, so that's something that's noticeable, but not necessarily measurable. Even though you can clearly see a difference, it's not something that we can measure how much of a difference other than the scale, which is going down. So you have those markers of progress that are both tangible and intangible. So I would say that progress has been validated on my end for sure.
All right. Sounds like a win then for me. And then so the second validation will come from the next random person I ask. It'll probably be somebody at the gym for this time. So one of our training partners. And then we'll talk about it on our next episode briefly.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
okay. So my next goal was that I wanted to get to a body weight of 220 pounds. Now that would have been the highest body weight that I would have ever been. Now you kind of have to annotate that goal with me doing it, and here's where it becomes not measurable, is I didn't want it to be sloppy. Now, I wanted body composition to remain relatively respectful or
Right.
respectable. So like it's not like I would just compromise all of my goals as a bodybuilder just to get a weight on the scale. It's not as though I'm just going to start pushing tons of food and adding fat for no reason just for the sake of seeing an ambiguous arbitrary number on the scale go up. But
Right.
when body weight does go up, as long as training is in place and the nutrition is somewhat adequate, it's going to result in progress that's going to benefit me on stage too. So the goal was to get to 220 pounds. Now I had a little bit of a setback because I was sick for 4 days with some type of stomach bug. At first, I thought I had food poisoning. However, there were several people who I was in contact with that got sick during that time frame with the exact symptoms and progressions of the illness that I had. So it was definitely something that was contagious, just some type of stomach bug, where the first day was nothing but vomiting and then followed by 3 consecutive days of diarrhea. It had gotten so bad that I actually had to go and get 2 IVs at the Youngstown Drip, which is a nearby IV clinic about 20 minutes from my house. So I went and got some IVs and rehydrated. Essentially went the better part of 4 days with minimal to no eating whatsoever. And when I got on the scale, I was only 5 pounds under. Now that was after the IVs too, so I was relatively rehydrated. But I was really nervous because I'm like, oh my gosh, because every time I get an illness, now it comes back because a lot of it's just glycogen depletion from not eating and dehydration from not being properly hydrated with my electrolytes and my water like I normally would be. But still, you just like get nervous because you get sick for a little bit and the scale just like plummets weight. And
Right.
what happened was I was only, I think, 5 pounds down. And that was kind of shocking to me because when you go 4 days with eating virtually nothing, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I only lost 5 pounds. That's awesome. So I hydrated even more optimally than I was before. And my appetite came back over the course of probably about a week to get back to normal. Um, After my appetite came back, I implemented a few more cheat meals than I normally would throughout the course of the week, just to try to get some excess calories back in, which was approved by my coach to do so. And after that, when all was said and done, a week after my illness or 2 weeks after my illness, I was heavier than before when I got sick. So still
There
making
we go.
linear progress and still a ways to go before I hit 220, but well on my way currently. And if the progress continues that I made this month, I will reach the goal. So it's the same thing. You know, I'm very far away from it, but in terms of micromanaging and breaking it down and itemizing it month to month, if I make the progress, if I take the progress I made in January and I replicate that 11 more times, then I will certainly be where I want to be.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yep. So everything, I guess, tentatively, as far as that box is concerned, we can check that one off as well.
I would have to agree. All right, so my turn.
Yep.
My next one would be prioritize my financial success. So with this one, I don't have like I said in the beginning. You know, my goal was to be real vague. I just wanted to put a priority on what am I doing with my money. Because at the end of the month, you know, you should be able to look back and see what you've done with your money. In the years past, I've been kind of irresponsible, and there's never really any money left at the end of the month. You know, we don't go without, but we don't have anything to show for it. Other than, you know, we do. I guess that's bad to say. We have a house, we have nice cars, but there's no like tangible money left over.
Yeah.
So it's been a goal of mine to prioritize building a budget that makes sense. And I believe that in our household, we're finally on track to have money saved at the end of the year and be working towards the whole thought of being financially free. So finding some financial freedom. So I'm excited. Nothing crazy yet. You know, it's not like I'm sitting on a jackpot of $1 million in the bank now, but we're working towards the goal of financial freedom. So,
And plus, sometimes it just takes, to be honest, it doesn't take a whole lot sometimes.
right.
Because I think it's one of those instances where you make a few minor changes and then you start looking at everything through that lens. So once you
Right.
make a few financial changes or adjustments to your budget in terms of how you spend it or where your money is spent, then you start to accrue a little bit of money in the bank, and then it becomes almost addicting in a good way, where it's like, wow,
Absolutely.
I saved $200 this month because I just made these tiny changes. Well, what if I make more changes? Would I double that? Would I make 400 and then 800 and then 1600? Like, would I double my money every time if I just
Right.
continue down that way? So then it becomes, and let's be completely honest, like with you and your wife both, you guys have very, very financially, what's the word I'm looking for? Financially rewarding professions. So there's no reason why you shouldn't allow a bunch of money to pile up in your favor, as long as you guys are following through on what you're saying you're doing.
Right. Exactly. So, as long as we do what we say we want to do, we should be where we want to be.
Yeah.
And I think we're on our way. I honestly do. And it's the first time in my adult life that I can sit back and honestly say, I think we're on our way to actually meet the destination. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Obviously, I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy, because I think the fun part about this will be is after we get there or get to where we're getting there more consistently and we get good at it, I will be able to help people in another way, as to where I've been able to help people lose weight, or at least talking, through the steps to get started. It would be cool if I could be able to be the person that helps somebody learn how to manage their money a little better too, through my experiences of how not to do it.
Yes.
Because that's my ultimate goal, as everybody knows. Anybody that listens to our show with any regularity, they know that one of my biggest goals in life is to always help people in some way, shape, or form.
And I think that the first way to be able to help people is certainly self-mastery of whatever the area is.
Right.
So that's very cool, man. I'm glad that you guys are on your way with that. I'll go with my third and final goal, which was to have 10,000 followers on Instagram. Now, this is a unique goal, and I always believe that context is important in all areas of life, but specifically to this goal, context is very important. So I need to explain the premise of the goal and the rationale behind the goal first. So this was kind of one of those like reverse engineering type deals. Like, okay, if my ultimate goal is to grow my brand and grow my business, what platform am I going to be able to grow my business on the most? And that would be Instagram, considering it's the one I use most frequently. How would I directly benefit from gaining followers? It's nothing intrinsically rewarding for me, to be fair. So I know that a lot of people chase likes and they want like the kind of the gratification that comes with social acceptance on social media, which, to be honest, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. If a bunch of people liking your picture makes you feel good, then by golly, just keep posting stuff. And I hope that you get the likes and the gratification that you're looking for. But for me, it was more of a business tool. So what I need to do is I realized that I needed to upregulate my online presence in order to just develop a more sound and financially sound structure of how I went about my programming and my training with my online people. So the 10,000 thing was not necessarily anything that I specifically went and crunched numbers and tried to calculate number of views and number of hits and the leads that would eventually go into, and how many phone calls I could set up based on X amount of followers, and try to make sales pitches to people for training services or anything like that. I just thought 10,000 was a pretty cool number. And I go by the old adage, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. So if I continued to use Instagram the way I used Instagram in years past, I wouldn't be able to do that because that would not be enough of an online presence for me. So I have to upscale how I do things online. So I have been posting more frequently. And then I'm going to start diving into, I mean, since the new year started, I posted 2 reels, which I had never done reels before. So I believe I have reels now, maybe 2 of them, but regardless, I posted a few reels, which I guess it affects the algorithm a little bit differently than standard pictures do. So I've been going about the steps to try to make my online following bigger, and it's worked. I've gained a couple dozen followers since January, but this is the one goal I have, that if I continue this progress, I will not meet the 10,000 people goal. The interesting thing about Instagram and gaining followers and social media is generally, I don't, in my experience, it doesn't happen entirely linearly. It's not like this linear curve or this linear progression where you're going to average X amount of followers, like 20 followers this week, 20 followers the next, 20 followers the next. It's not really how it works. Generally, what happens in my experience in talking with people is you make a particular post that just so happens to get retweeted or reposted or shared on people's stories or whatever, and kind of more or less goes viral, for lack of a better
Right.
phrase. And then followers come in chunks. So I'm going to be continuing to try to make good content in the hopes that maybe I'll get a bunch of followers in chunks from maybe a very, very valuable post that gets shared and the algorithm deems as pushable. So it gets pushed to people's Explorer feeds more readily and maybe results in me getting some more people. So that box
Yeah.
I would not check because I'm not really on pace yet. But I feel like I'm not too concerned about me being behind the 8 ball on that one.
I think you're doing all the things. I think you're checking all the boxes that are inside of that to do. Like
Yeah.
you're doing the things that are necessary to get there, and it's noticeable. And you've always, I feel like you've always been pretty active, and on Instagram especially. But it seems like you're even more active, and it's all purposeful information that you're sharing, which is going to be viewed and seen by a target audience.
Yep.
So I mean, although you say you wouldn't check the box, I think you should at least put a dash into the box because it's starting. If you're going down the right road, you know what I mean. So if you travel the new road, eventually you'll get traction and get following, which is what the goal is.
I think that's fair.
So I'm an optimist. I'm trying to be very optimistic. I wish I would have put that as one of my goals, is always be optimistic, but I did not. So we will use that for 23.
All right. So you have one last goal, I believe, then?
Yes, I do. So my last goal, and I think this is the most important goal, honestly, because without this one, none of the other ones even matter to me. At all. So my last goal was to be the best father I could possibly be. Above all else, be a great father is how I worded it on paper. So in that area, I don't know. She can't talk too well yet, so she can't tell me if I'm doing the right things. But I feel like today was a big win for the fatherhood column. I got to watch my daughter take her first steps that were more than just, the 1-2 fall down, 1-2 fall down.
Wow.
Yeah, I picked her up from daycare today, and I guess to be fair, I didn't get to see her first steps because they got to, but they brought her over into the hallway to where I was standing and set her on the floor, and I was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she stood up and walked all the way across the room to me.
Awesome.
So it was very cool. It was heartwarming. And then I brought her home, obviously, and she walked all over the house. So it's so fun. This is, being a father and getting to do the things in life that I've always dreamed to do it's an honor, it's a blessing, and it's been incredible. So I would say check the box because she can't tell me that I'm not.
Yes.
So we'll revisit that when she can.
Now, to close up shop, I want to add here real quick something that I've done just to keep me honest a little bit and keep me refreshed is every day I have a notepad on my phone that I open, which is kind of my to-do list. And it's not like I have set times for them. It's just little things like if I have to stop at the bank or if I have to remember to return an email to so and so, or have to set up a dermatologist appointment, or if I have these random things I have to do, I just keep it all on a notepad. And every day I'm constantly deleting and adding things to that notepad on my phone. It's my to do list. And some of the items, most of the items are daily, but there are some things that I need to do later on the week that I also need a reminder for. So I have like this ongoing notepad, which is basically my form of a date book. And on it, at the bottom of the page, I have my 3 New Year's resolution goals. So every single day, literally every single day, when I open my notepad, I see those 3 goals. First thing in the morning, when I'm on my phone, on my notepad, and generally one of the last things I see before I go to bed in the evening as well. So I'm constantly reminded of what those goals are and kind of serves as a little bit of the kind of reality check or wake up call of sorts. Like, hey, you saw that. Are you doing that? Did you make progress there today? So that's a little strategy that I've been using that I think has been helping at least focus my mind towards them a little bit. So
I like it. I like that a lot. And I typically take your little like quirky things and I try to implement them myself because when you see success, you want to follow success, right?
we're sure, which is the whole point of us being here talking today.
That's right. So,
all right. So with that,
like
we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 115. We appreciate you guys listening and we look forward to speaking with you next week.
Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the edge and take it all. I'm born